What's up, NBA fans? Dom2K on the mic, and at the time of this recording, we are well into the 2017 NBA postseason. If you haven't been living under a rock for the last 48 hours, you already know we've seen some pretty good basketball, starting out in Cleveland where the playoffs really began with a bang, and the Pacers just missed that opportunity to take Game 1 in Cleveland, which really would have helped their chances in the series. And then out in Toronto, I guess you could say the Bucks upset the Raptors in Game 1, but then again, is it really called an upset when the Raptors make a habit out of losing Game 1 pretty much every time to make the playoffs? I don't know, that's for you guys to decide. But for me, I spent a lot of time watching pretty much every matchup this weekend, and I started to think to myself that by the time June comes around, you might be saying to yourself that the 2017 NBA playoffs were some of the best you've ever watched. And I really wanted to get a jump on this idea before the playoffs really got going, because at the time of this recording, only Game 1s have happened. So today I'm going to give you guys 5 things you should be thinking about while you're watching the playoffs that might influence you to believe that the 2017 NBA playoffs could be some of the best you've ever watched. Number 5. Up-and-coming teams. As an NBA fan, nothing should be able to get you more excited for the future of the league than looking at the crop of talent and teams that we really have coming in the future. And this playoffs is a really good time to get a snapshot of that, because you can just kind of individually see them in the bracket and track their progress. So what I mean by that is, if you take a look at teams like the Bucks, the Jazz, and the Wizards, these are all teams that you may think aren't ready to win the NBA championship this year, but more so in this year than any other year before, it seems like we have teams that are actually in the playoffs for a reason. So what I'm trying to say is, back in the years 2013, 2014, you would have teams like the Bobcats, the Nets, and even the Bucks. I'm thinking back specifically to the year 2013 when they played against the Heat, and it just kind of seemed like these teams were existing there as tune-ups for the contending teams in the first round. You didn't know if they were actually going to be in the playoffs the next year. It didn't seem like they were building towards anything. They just made the playoffs just to be there. But this year, you really see teams that might be a problem in the future. So rather than just being in the brackets just to exist as a tune-up, they're actually building something. They're getting playoff experience, and specifically the example I'm thinking about is the Bucks and Giannis Antetokounmpo. I'm thinking he's probably going to be the player that dominates the East after LeBron James is gone. So even though I'm predicting they won't make it any farther than the second round this year, I'm looking at it saying this is very valuable if they do go on to face Cleveland in the second round. They get that experience, they come back next year, the players are more developed, and in the long run, you've got a contending team. I feel the same exact way about the Utah Jazz. Hopefully Rudy Gobert can come back healthy, but you can see that they're clearly building something there with Gordon Hayward, and especially the Wizards with John Wall and Bradley Beal. These are really good looking teams for the future, and even though we don't have any of them winning the championship, I think the 2017 NBA playoffs are of great value to these teams and their growth. Number 4. The newest superstars. This one is very similar to the last point, but check it out. So I was watching the Celtics and Bulls play. Dwayne Wade got out on a fast break, and he got hung on a dunk that he definitely would have made about 2 or 3 years ago. This made me realize that, man, we are really at the end of this saga with the players like Dwayne Wade and Carmelo Anthony. They're still useful for something, but they're not really the league superstars anymore, and they've been the league superstars for quite some time. A lot of us have spent so many years growing up with these players that we forgot something is going to come after them. But in the year 2017, look no further, because the newest superstars are right in front of our eyes, and they're really starting to play into their primes. So I'm gonna run off a list of names here. You got guys like Kawhi Leonard, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Gordon Hayward, Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, Jimmy Butler, John Wall, Bradley Beal, DeMar DeRozan, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Paul George, and you can even say Isaiah Thomas. For the kids who are in their teenage years right now, in the middle school years, those players are to them what Dwayne Wade, Carmelo Anthony, and all those other guys have been to us for all these years. And the good thing for the NBA is that now that our players are starting to phase out, these players are really starting to get into it, and they're starting to lead teams that you could possibly call contenders. And for me, it's exciting to see the evolution of the NBA in that way in these playoffs, because I think this year, more so than any other, this is really the year when you can start to give some of these guys a chance to maybe beat the top dog in their conferences. So specifically, one guy I've seen the most progress in is in DeMar DeRozan. Now, he didn't have an amazing game 1, but overall, I've been tracking his progress from years on, because I've always looked at Toronto and I thought they didn't really have a superstar. And DeRozan, he clearly progressed pretty far from where he was last year into this season. Still waiting to see what he does in this entire postseason. But more and more, you're starting to see that, yeah, the Raptors are going to be a major player, because he's going to be that guy pretty soon. And another specific player I look at is John Wall, because to me this season, he's become the best point guard in the East. And on the Wizards, I'm starting to look at the Wizards as a team that's just kind of a nuisance to all the top contenders in the East, to a team that could potentially actually knock one of them off sooner than later. So that's pretty exciting to see all these new players really come onto the main stage and actually have teams behind them that you think can win soon. Number 3, star matchups. Now, it's funny we came into the season saying there wasn't a lot of parity. We know the Warriors are going to win. This season is going to be lame. The playoffs are going to be boring. And even if we do have a good idea of what these playoffs are going to end up like, all the matchups leading up to that are very, very interesting because they are extremely star-studded. So even in this first round, right now, I watched the Warriors in Portland today, and although that resulted in a blowout, the Blazers were in that game all the way through. And it was very fun to see Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum going against the Warriors stars. That was pretty amazing. Then of course you got the two historic players in James Harden and Russell Westbrook. On the other side of the bracket, you've got players like Isaiah Thomas and Jimmy Butler going off against each other, DeMar DeRozan, Giannis Antetokounmpo in the first round, and of course Paul George and LeBron James. But it's not even just the first round, because when you move the bracket forward and you see what the matchups are going to be, it's only going to get more exciting. For instance, I've been looking at the what if scenario of if the Bucks actually do end up knocking off the Raptors, which can happen because I totally forgot in my predictions that the Raptors don't always show up to be the team that you think they're going to be in the playoffs. So should we get the Bucks and the Cavaliers in the next round, I call it like the King versus the Prince matchup in LeBron James versus Antetokounmpo. Yeah, the Cavaliers would probably win, but it would still be amazing to see those two duel because I assume that's going to be a pretty big rivalry sooner than later. And even before that, just right now watching Paul George and LeBron James go at it is amazing. Even if you don't think the Pacers have a chance to actually win that series, that's still a very fun duel to watch. If the most likely thing happens in the West, we're probably going to see Kawhi Leonard and James Harden play, and not only are those two of the newest superstars in the NBA, but we've seen how that matchup plays out every time it happened in the regular season, and it's definitely going to be amazing for the playoff value. So even if all these teams don't have a realistic chance at the NBA championship, there's a lot of star-studded matchups to look forward to, and there's a lot of them going on right now, so if you're a real basketball fan, you can just appreciate that for what it's worth. Number 2, chinking the armor. I've been doing a lot of talking about this for basically the last month of the season, but it's basically the fact that for the first time in a good 7 years, we actually believe that there's a chance that a LeBron James led team could lose before they get to the NBA Finals. Now, I'm on record saying that yes, I would have to see it with my own eyes to actually put any money behind Cleveland getting beat before they make it out of the Eastern Conference. However, that's not me not acknowledging that there's actually a chance that it could happen, because I am looking at some other teams with potential to do it, and I'm also looking at the vulnerability Cleveland has showed in their defense. That didn't change in game 1 against the Pacers, because anybody who watched that game saw that the Cavaliers were still making the same mistakes on defense, and that's a large part of why that game the Pacers were able to play terrible defense. They were able to put smaller guys on LeBron and everything, and they still came out with a chance to win that game, and it's because the Cavaliers have not closed up those holes in the defense. Now, that's okay against the Pacers where there's one star like Paul George, but as you get later in the playoffs where more teams have firepower and they're just more well put together in general, like you might face the Raptors in the second round or possibly even see the Wizards in the Eastern Conference Finals, then you're starting to look at it and say, how much can you actually get away with before you can't play bad defense anymore? And just that small chance right there makes the East a whole lot more entertaining, because you see some good teams here, and it's not like previous years where you say, oh, they're going to run into Cleveland and it's just over. This year I'm seeing more and more fans believe that, we're going to run into Cleveland and we're going to give them a good run for their money. So I don't know how many of you actually felt like me when LeBron James was still on the Heat, but even when they were getting tangled up with the Pacers, I never truly felt like they could lose to them. Even when the Heat got to that game 7 with Indiana, of course I was hoping for the Pacers to win, but I really kind of felt it that the Heat got this. And I cannot say the same if we get to the Eastern Conference Finals and the series goes late and they're playing against Washington. I'm going to go in there not knowing what's going to happen, and that always makes the playoffs a lot more interesting, even if, it's not going to last until the NBA Finals. But finally, the East has a little bit of parity I think we can grab onto. Number 1, the story. As NBA fans, we always hope that the allegations that the NBA is scripted are false, and there's a 99% chance they're false because it would be extremely hard to script most of this. However, you gotta admit that there are some storylines that get created inadvertently, and they end up pretty interesting. And especially this year, even before the NBA Finals, we've got some pretty cool storylines here. So in the first round, I already see it with the Rockets and Thunder. Of course, MVP has already been voted on. The playoffs have no bearing on who's actually going to win MVP, but that does not stop fans from talking. So when you have Russell Westbrook and James Harden matched up, of course Russ has a terrible game tonight, James Harden plays great. Even though Russ has emerged as the clear favorite to win MVP, now you've got people saying, hold on, Russell Westbrook still turning the ball over, James Harden's still winning. It doesn't have any effect on the MVP, but for now and for the future of the NBA, it makes this whole James Harden-Russell Westbrook storyline very interesting to follow. It's not likely that these two ever end up being real rivals because they played on the same team, they're good friends. However, for those of us watching, it makes it very interesting down the road when, Russell Westbrook probably gets eliminated this year, but it makes it very interesting a couple of years later when both of these guys actually have some legitimate help to win a championship, and then they meet each other in the playoffs. Now they've got some history that's being created right now in the playoffs, and just overall, these could end up being two names that are tied together in history because of what they've both done this season and what they might go on to do in next seasons, and whatever happens in the playoffs right now. For the Jazz and Clippers, I don't know about you guys, but I'm starting to look at the Clippers as that heavyweight fighter that's in the last round, and it just doesn't look like they can hang on anymore. And specifically what I'm referring to is Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan. I think we all have a good understanding that if they lose in the first round, especially to the Jazz with an injured Gobert or no Gobert at all, I think this is the end of the Clippers as we know them. Somebody's leaving. I don't know who it is, whether it's Chris Paul, whether it's Blake, or DJ's gone somehow, but that roster probably won't be together after the season. So a lot of us right now are looking at the Clippers saying, can they at least hang on to beat the Jazz in the first round? Because I think a lot of us feel like they should, whether it's a 7-game series or not. The Clippers should at least be in the second round this year. And if that doesn't happen, we're starting to say the landscape of the NBA might change, because Blake Griffin and Chris Paul, those are power players, and where they go matters next season. So that's something that's being created right now in the playoffs. However, something I'm kind of hoping for, I'm hoping that I was wrong in my Raptors and Bucks prediction, because I would love to see the Bucks go against the Cavaliers, because I feel like that's a clash of the present versus the future. As I've said earlier in this video, Giannis is going to run things when LeBron is gone. And Giannis showed in this first game, he is a full-grown man out here, okay? Now, I know he's been in the playoffs before, but not like this. When he was in the playoffs in 2015, he was just a role player. Nobody knew exactly what he was going to be yet. But now he's only one step below a superstar, and he comes into the playoffs. To me, this was like his first playoff game, because now he's on the main stage, and boy, did he deliver. It was pretty ridiculous watching him dominate in the paint. This guy dunks every time he's near the rim. So we see the potential. We see that once he gets a jump shot, there's going to be absolutely no way to defend him, because right now I see a lot of the defenders daring him to shoot the basketball. Once he develops that, Giannis is the next best player in the NBA. And if we can get a cool matchup between him and LeBron James right now, we're going to look back at this about 3 years down the road and say, that's back when he was being prepped to run the East. And I think that'll be pretty cool to see the evolution of that as the years go on. And I can already see the media hyping that up like crazy. They're going to be calling it the heir to the throne, king versus the prince. They're going to come up with all kinds of things for that. And it's just going to be entertaining to watch from a basketball standpoint and for the future standpoint. And finally, we have the NBA Finals that we all expect to happen. Now, regardless of what happens in the playoffs, in the end, we all expect it to be the Warriors and the Cavaliers. And although many people feel like me that the Cavaliers probably shouldn't be able to contend with them, I did see one comment that was pretty interesting, and it was the mentality coming into the NBA Finals and the mental aspect of being in the NBA Finals. And the Cavaliers and Warriors still has the potential to be a competitive NBA Finals just because of that mental aspect. LeBron James, that will be his 7th NBA Finals by then. We know LeBron is ready to go all out and leave it all on the floor once he gets there. But when you actually look at it from the standpoint of who these guys actually are, it would be pretty amazing when you think about it. First of all, LeBron has beaten Curry and Durant in an NBA Finals before. Beat Kevin Durant back when he was a lot younger, and although that series didn't look close because of the scores, it was actually pretty good if you were there to witness it. And then of course the whole thing with Game 7 and 3-1 comeback last year against the Golden State Warriors and Steph Curry. Now, although the Warriors definitely play better basketball and they have the better team, just look at the names on that floor. Kyrie Irving, LeBron James, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant. All these guys on the same floor in a best-of-7 matchup for the NBA championship. When the Cavaliers and Warriors meet, just because I don't expect it to be competitive doesn't mean it won't be competitive. If we get to the NBA Finals and the Cavaliers somehow actually start making the Warriors sweat, you've got all types of things at play there. You have the fact that the Warriors went out and got Kevin Durant this summer, and they blew the 3-1 lead last year, and they come back and oh shit, can they actually beat Cleveland this year? And then if they don't beat Cleveland, I couldn't even imagine being in the shoes of someone like Steph Curry or Kevin Durant, because if you thought that the Miami Heat got a lot of hate for losing the 2011 NBA Finals, it will be nothing compared to what the 2017 Warriors get for losing it. But if all goes as expected and the Warriors end up winning it, now you've got the whole thing with Steph Curry and redemption and Kevin Durant's first ring, and then you go into the offseason wondering what adjustments does someone like the Cleveland Cavaliers make so that they can actually have a competitive series in the coming years, because the Warriors probably, bearing any significant injuries, that team's probably not going anywhere anytime soon, so then you've got something really interesting to look at. And there you have it. Those are 5 reasons why I think the 2017 NBA playoffs might end up being some of the best you've ever watched. You've got everything from the type of stories we've got, to the type of matchups, the up and coming talent, to what this playoffs actually means for the future of the NBA. I think that's something that people aren't really looking at. I'm very excited for it because I think I see where this is going in the next few years, and I just find it really interesting that in a year where the Warriors added a great player and we thought the season was going to be boring, not only did the regular season turn out being one of the best in history, but the playoffs definitely may be turning out to be some of the best we've ever seen as well. So what do you guys think? Do you think this playoffs will end up being some of the best you've seen? And from what you've seen so far, just leave your thoughts on that too, because I know some unexpected things have happened. The potential for upsets are very high, and upsets also always make the playoffs more entertaining. So I want to hear your thoughts on that. Make sure to hit the like button, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed. Hit the bell next to my name if you want notifications on my videos. I'm Dom2K, and I'll be with you guys as this playoff progresses. Thanks for watching.